Are we ready? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with the Councilors. I'm Nancy McCarthy, and this is Robin Risley over here. Say hi, Robin.
Hello. Good morning.
We have a few new ones here today. With us here in the council chambers is Bruce St. Dennis, who is our city manager, and I see Jason Skirmerhorn, our police chief, is zooming in today. So didn't want to brave that wind and rain or anything, did you? All right. So what we're going to do is go through the list of people that we have here, ask them what they'd like to talk about, and then we'll come back and start talking. So start our discussion. So Betsy, on my screen, I see that you're first. So anything you'd like to talk about today?
Well, nothing very interesting or new in it, but it's about parking enforcement. I know parking's an ongoing issue, but I'm wondering in the off season if there is much of an attempt to patrol the park use, parking only, and also the parking in front of the post office. As the weather gets really bad, it's nice to be able to pick up my mail. I know this is kind of petty stuff in the big picture, but it's one of the things that kind of like, dang, you know, that car looks like it's been there a really long time and it doesn't look like there's anyone in the park. Not that I'm going to the park, so maybe it's only like, oh, you only enforce parking when the weather's nice, or I'm not really sure what the point of those signs on the ground are. Anyway, that's it. My petty little grievance for the day.
Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Betty, hi. I see you were just in a parks meeting, so you've been on Zoom for a while today. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
No, I've run out of things to say.
Okay.
I'm just interested.
All right. And Jenny, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, I kind of missed the beginning, so maybe somebody already brought it up. I guess the one thing I'm most concerned about these days is kind of the divisiveness in our town, and I don't feel like it's one issue. I don't feel like it's one group. I feel like it's partly the end of tourist season, and of course the issues that we've had, national politics, world, discontent. I just wish there was a way we could kind of get our town back together again.
Yeah, everybody's kind of grumpy lately, that's for sure. And I imagine there's all kinds of reasons for that.
Right.
So,
and it's not just Cannon Beach for sure, but we've had our issues that have created a little more kind of meanness about it.
Yeah, we do have some cranky people, me included.
And we're only going to get crankier the longer it rains.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. We have, is it Randy Neal? Hi, welcome.
Hi.
And, hi.
Yeah, I have two topics. One is I'd like to talk a little bit about the transportation plan.
The
And
what?
then the other one is
Transportation plan.
maybe get some information about the SDCs.
STCs, okay. All right, transportation plan and the systems development charges, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. That'd be great. Okay, we have the History Center, and that's, you're welcome to join us. Thank you for joining us. This is the first time we've seen the History Center.
It's Andrea. It's Andrea.
Where are we at?
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just got the invitation, so I just decided to join.
Good, good. Let me get your name because I don't think I know you.
My name is Andrea Suarez, and I'm the development coordinator at the museum.
Oh, good. Well, welcome, Andrea.
Andrea was on our HRIP staff for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good to see you all.
Do you have anything that you would like to talk about, or are you just here to listen, or?
I think I'm just here to listen today.
Okay, good.
Thank
Well,
you.
We really enjoy having you. Hi, Rick. This is Rick Gray. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about, Rick? And you're muted, so. Need to unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Not necessarily, but I'll see what the topics are. Hello, Betsy. Saw you on the beach the other day.
Okay. Nancy,
Morning.
well, good morning. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about today?
Not yet. I'm here to listen and see what comes up. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sharon. Oh, Sharon, you're muted, Sharon. There you go.
Morning.
Good morning.
No, I'm just here to listen.
All right, boy, we're going to be
Here to
doing a lot
listen
of
so
listening
far.
today. We're going to be doing a lot of listening today. Let's see, Deb. And you are muted. And there you go.
I got my booster yesterday, so I'm not feeling very well. So I'm going to kind of just see what kind of go with the flow here and see what comes up. So if I could say something if I need to, but I may not. So I don't have any pressing issue.
Okay. Les, I saw you peeking into the Zoom. What do you have on your mind today?
Lynn is here as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Lynn.
Since Bruce is here, I have a question for him. We live on a creek and the creek rose and it probably rose more than we've ever seen it rise. And I don't know who's in charge, if we need to report it, if we need some help, maybe cleaning it up. It's just a little drainage ditch going into the culvert that runs under the parking lot. Anyway, I just don't know who to talk to about it. And so I'm sure Bruce knows.
Yep.
Thank you. And all around the city, you're going to see similar situations with over 6 inches of rain, six and a quarter inches of rain in 5 days.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
I saw that picture that you sent, that I guess you thought you were sending it to somebody else, but you sent it to me. And I did look a little, that's why I asked if Public Works knew about it, because Public Works would be the people that would.
Well, that was what I didn't know for sure. I'd been told at one time that the city was not in charge of the creek, that it was under the purview of someone else. And so that's why I knew Bruce would know who to talk to.
Yeah. All right.
But that's it.
We'll get to it.
All right.
Richard, welcome. What would you like to talk about today?
I'm just here to listen and thank you for these meetings.
All right. Okay. And then Jan, you're here today. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, I'm also listening and just very grateful for these meetings.
Okay, well, we're doing a lot of listening today, but I imagine the conversation will get going pretty soon. All right, let's take the easy one first. Bruce, would you like to talk about the creeks rising? You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Any update on our flooding situation?
Yeah, and our folks were out a lot on the weekend. They're checking things again today. Lynn, when you're talking about the responsibility, in some cases, some of the waterways are under the Corps of Engineers, others are influenced by DEQ, but overall, we're responsible for the drainage. So we will be checking your area. Did anybody around you have flooding in the houses? Lynn?
And
I'm trying to unmute.
Okay.
No, our neighbor's outbuilding probably got a little water in it, but it's close to the creek. But no, we know we can't build there. It's just at what time do we need to be proactive? And do something more.
And what we try to do as far as being proactive, it's usually an issue that's downstream. And so there might be a culvert where it goes into, and if the culvert is plugged, those sort of things. So our streets and drainage people are out today just keeping track of all those things. I think they're out over the weekend too.
Yeah, and they had come and cleaned out the lot, the line, I guess it drains to the ocean before
Yes.
all of this fall,
Yes.
which was a very good idea because that we had, it was amazing is all I can say. We
Yeah.
had a river.
And usually
Anyway.
what happens is that you get a large volume of water in an open waterway, and then the size of the culverts sometimes take it, but the culvert becomes a restriction point, and so it'll hold water back from the open waterway. And so when we get into those situations, our biggest concern is making sure houses don't flood on the inside.
Right.
So yeah.
All right,
But
thank you.
hopefully you're staying dry.
How's the
Pretty much.
flooding? How's the flooding in general in town? Is it pretty much under control, or
Yeah.
any problems?
Well, yeah, there's banks are overflowing, going into yards, that kind of thing. There's a couple places up on the north end that can get into houses, and I know that we're focused up there.
Yeah.
But it's just the volume.
Yeah. Bad out there. All right, so Lynn, did that take care of your question?
Yep, I'm gonna call Bruce if I have a problem.
Okay.
Please do.
All right, that sounds
Thank
good.
you.
All right, let's take the next one. Let's take Betsy's parking enforcement question. I think that's more of a Jason answer.
Yes.
Sorry to hound you about this stuff, Jason.
Hi there. You're not hounding me at all. Sorry, I have to work from home today. My wife had some pretty invasive surgery last week, and so I'm caregiver. But the parking issue is certainly something that we address when we have time. As you know, there's only one on during the day. So if we're tied up on something else, we have to take the priorities. But no, we certainly, I will get the word out to everybody to make sure they're watching in front of the post office there, because I know what a headache that can be, as well as the other parking issues. But yes, we still do enforce all those things throughout the year, but we do the best we can with the time we have.
Okay.
Well, and I know talking about the transportation plan, there really hadn't been an emphasis on the residents, which I think this is a piece of, where the locals need to have places to park so that they can come and do their business too, as well as tourists and businesses. So hopefully that'll become a larger piece of what's being proposed.
And then one more little thing, thanks for that, Robin and Jason, but is it kind of just understood that in front of the post office somehow those 10-minute places only get enforced during business hours? Because it seems like in the evening, it's, if have been out of town or I come back, and it's, of course, by 8 o'clock, I'm practically in bed these days. It's still dark and stormy, but anyway, I'll just be looking for place, and it's just, there's no one in the post office. There's cars parked in the 10-minute parking place in front of the post office. And I'm just like, yeah, I know it's not a big deal, but it's just one of those kind of like creeping things where, I don't know, maybe just even repainting those zones so that it's really clear, especially the ones on the west side of the street. They're really not particularly noticeable anymore.
I'll take a look at it. I know we do enforce it throughout the day and evening, but I'll look at the paint as well. I know that there's a certain day that Public Works has a crew that comes in to repaint different areas, so I'll make sure that's on the list.
Yeah, not the greatest time of the year to be out painting.
Oh, they can do it. Today's perfect. The wind will dry it.
Oh, the optimist. All right. Betsy, did that take care of your question?
Oh, yeah, this is, thank you. Yes.
Sure. Let's see, we have the transportation plan and the systems development charges. Randy had a question about that.
Randy, if you can wait just a second, let me get Karen in here. She's the one that's handling all that.
Karen is? Oh, system development charges.
System development, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can do transportation first.
Sure. So we have a, can you talk about the transportation plan, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay.
What was the question?
You know, one of the things that came out in the last work session, I think it was Nancy asking, you know, how do inputs get incorporated into this? It sort of seems like the process is, you know, there's a presentation created, and it seems like it's probably created by a pretty small group of the consultants and maybe the staff. And then it seems like it's presented to the committee, and it's, you know, 40 minutes of presentation and 20 minutes of collecting inputs. And then there's an open house, and it's sort of the same process, same presentation, you know, and pretty much the same types of inputs are given back in like 20 minutes, you know, whatever the 5 or 6 inputs can be given in 20 minutes. And then it seemed like the city council meeting pretty much was the same thing, same presentation, same kind of thing, collected 5 or 6 inputs. You know, I've tried to either attend or watch most of these things, and there's a pretty consistent list of about 20 things that people are interested in. And, you know, a lot of them probably require a more in-depth conversation with the community. And it doesn't seem like there's some vehicle that helps drive that. You know, whether the topic is freight unloading or bicycling or employee parking, you know, I'm a little afraid that if we don't collect enough community involvement and community inputs, you know, we'll wake up one day and all the business owners will be against this, or, you know, we'll find something doesn't make sense for the people who need that. And then there's some topics that, you know, are people's hot buttons, but they haven't even seemed to pop up in those presentations, like neighborhood right-of-way parking isn't one. You know, the sunset S-curves and safety around that seems to pop up, but, you know, there's nothing about should we be parking up there, you know, whatever. There's things about, you know, maybe let's put bike lanes on that, or, you know, other things that seem like they're even much less priority than things that can happen. And then the other one is there's like 2 areas of parking. It's our largest 2 areas of parking. Don't seem to even be mentioned in our strategic plan. And one of those is Tolovana. The other one might be Cola Creek. You know, the Parks Master Plan talked about those types of things, but the parking plan hasn't mentioned those at all. So I'd like to get a better feel of how is this going to go, you know, going forward to get, you know, sort of get everybody's inputs on loading docks and employee parking and neighborhood right-of-way parking. And, you know, and then probably the biggest thing is, you know, the consultants said that we might need up to 30% more, you know, we will get 30% more traffic over the next 20 years. But the solutions seem to be, you know, things that we can do to get ourselves another, you know, 10 parking spots or 30 parking spots or something like that, not 30% more.
That's a good point, Randy. A lot of good points, actually. I think you and I should talk sometime. I feel like that from what little I have been able to make out from the consultant reports so far, I've worked with this sort of thing before when I was practicing law, and it just seems to me like what they're doing is straight line projections. There's no proactivity about it at all. And what I think we as citizens need is to say, not how are we going to react to what happens to us, but what do we want to happen? And then how do we make it happen? How do we change things? You know, 30% more traffic? I don't know. 20-year, what is a 20-year straight line projection about anything in this world? nobody knows, but will say this, a 20-year straight line projection is to a planet that's in a whole lot of hurt. So I suspect there will be changes made about things like traffic or even who drives and how many people drive and things like that in 20 years. What I'd like to see is a group of us get together and start saying, what kind of future do we want? All I hear is either a discussion of let's keep it like it used to be, which never happens, or let's just figure out how we can adapt to what other people want to do, whether it's what we want them to do or not, particularly tourists and people like that. And I think we need to take control of the situation.
Rick, that is music to my ears. This is Bruce, and the reason is that when they're talking about like a 20 or 30%, projection, what happens to the communities on the beach when there's a 20 or 30% increase inland? Well, what happens is we can't stop. As they build houses, people are going to want to come to the beach. And so what happens is the beach communities tend to be the places that have to accommodate that load, absorb the costs, all those kind of things. And I was actually talking to the mayor about it this morning, and we wanted to talk about it when we do the councilors retreat, is kind of put in an element in the decisions that we make is what is the best situation for the residents? Because what you're talking about is doing what we always did. I call that the default position. And if we just try to find more parking, if that's the default position, it's only going to get worse. And we can't build our way out of it. And a lot of times, if you talk about roads or building parking garages, that just brings more people.
Yeah.
So
we might as well put up a Ferris wheel so that everybody can get a good look at the rock and just give up on having the kind of town we have.
Yeah, no, seriously. And then with some of the situations that we have, as I said, like when we're in the default position, I would love to see us get more involved with saying, what do we want?
Yep. And how do we get it?
And how do we get it, as opposed to trying to solve the problems that have just been building up and, getting us to where it's like, well, it's not like it used to be. And as you said, you can never keep it like that, but you can keep the essentials. If you ever, all the decisions that you make, it's like, okay, how is this going to affect the people that live here? And I had some experience with that in my previous community, and it was amazing what they accomplished. So hopefully we'll start seeing maybe a little bit more of that. And that's exactly what needs to happen. And as far as the transportation plan, we're just completing the data collection part.
Yep.
And so, and it's not to make an excuse, but those the kind of discussion we need to have is hard with COVID. And so we're doing it either, online, or people are watching meetings on YouTube or whatever. So hopefully we'll be able to get past that point, but there's going to be a lot of discussion about all of those options. Right now, we're just saying these are the things that are on the menu, and there will be more and more discussion. And that's actually one of the subjects that one of the counselors is asked to put on the retreat, and that is how are we going to go ahead and make decisions that are within the transportation study? So we're just at the point now that we're saying, this is what came out, this is what people said. And we actually got a really good reaction as far as people providing feedback on the surveys and things.
And you can always go to either contact Jeff Adams directly, or go to the website that the city's website that has the transportation plan page, and write to him and talk to him about what you would like to see in the transportation plan, or what kinds of things you think are lacking right now in the responses and in the data collection, or any ideas you have, maybe forming a group to talk about what we want to see in the future. Whatever you'd like to see done, please give him some feedback because he has been asking for that.
Well, I'll be happy to do that. I just want to say that my approach to all questions of governance is political rather than bureaucratic. So if there are people who would like to take action through the electoral process and through the lobbying process, I'm ready to start a group. I'm ready to be part of a group to start pushing for getting control over tourism and trying to figure out what kind of future we're going to have in a world that clearly is changing in a lot of ways that are connected to environmental change. We've got to do something about it. And I think it's time we had a group to fight for a rational approach to the future. So.
Okay.
And I have already submitted things to Jeff, probably once at the very beginning and again here not too long ago. But like I said, there were, the very first sort of open house, they went around and, basically just listed people's concerns. And that list is relatively small. It's about 20 items, except, what's coming out in the presentations is basically discussions on about 6 of them. And I think it would be important to get some groups to tackle some of these different kinds of questions, whether it's let's tackle how do we clamp down on how many people come here in the future, or, how should semi trucks make their way around town, or, what should we do with the S curves in terms of safety and parking and things like that, and who's the group of bicyclists that we should get together to sort out the details about bicycling.
Yep.
So, and I just don't see, I know there's a committee group, but for the most part, it seems like they're being presented to as opposed to being solicited from.
Yes. So give me a call.
Okay.
If I can respond to one other thing that Rick just said. I understand that you've got, kind of a background on the elected side or political side, I guess, as you call it. But involvement now, I mean, I look at it, I don't call it bureaucratic, I call it operations. And there are a number of things that are going on right now that people with your interest could influence. And I hope that you do stay involved. And like I said, what you explained and said, about people thinking about what can we do and how can we do it. That's exactly what this town needs, in my opinion. We need to change our path, the way that we do things.
Yep, I agree.
So, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it has to be a political aspect. It can be just, the conversations that people are having.
Well, I will respectfully disagree. I think it is great to have conversations, but when you have a whole lot of people who are not organized talking amongst each other, and there are other people who are organized, as we've seen in the recent election, the people who are organized may not be the majority, but they swing a big bat. And the people who aren't organized just talk to each other. And that's very nice, but, it actually takes more organization than that. I didn't see a single yard sign for the tax, for example. Of course not. We don't do that. But that's what this country is about. They're the loud minorities, but loud, and often special interests. But the general interest doesn't have a voice because it's a lot of scattered voices, each of which is very reasonable, very intelligent, very, very thoughtful. But in the end, they can't say, and we stand together, here's what we want. And that's who I am. That's the kind of person I am. So.
Well, Rick, I think you and Randy need to get together and talk, and then you're part of a support group that has been formed, and maybe members of that group want to also talk about that and get some ideas going too. So you might exchange information, or you can write to me and give me your contact information and I can pass it on, whatever you'd like.
That goes for anybody on here or anybody else who knows about that. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a hard ass, but the fact of the matter is that I I've been around government most of my life, and organization matters. It helps. And yeah, there are a lot of other ways to get things done too, but it always helps to be able to go back and say, there are a group of us who are willing to, have an election about this, have a candidate, put a candidate forward about this, things like that.
Yep. And Rick, if you could give me a call at City Hall, I would really love to talk to you more about this.
Of course. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And then Randy also had a question about the systems development charges.
Yep. And we have our Public Works Director, Karen Labonte, here to talk to you about that.
What's your questions?
I listened to the presentation online, a couple of weeks ago about the SBC charge. And a couple of the counselors had some questions about what are the assumptions that were used for the denominator of those things. And, the reply back was, well, it's really not important what's assumed in these population things as long as we're consistent. And it was interesting because the parks plan from 2017, suggested that we'd have 30% growth. And the water or sewer plan or the city master plan from 2015 was basically the opposite. It basically says, we have 100 more people that we will add to the city, and that'll be about 60 buildings or 60 projects. And the consultant said, well, it's really not important what the denominator is, because as long as we're consistent, we're using data from the same master plan, everything's okay. And that just sounded odd. And it sounded odd. I think it sounded odd to the counselors who listened to it. I would argue that, if I'm taking some amount of costs and dividing it by these 60 projects that are driving the SDC for water, sewer, and stormwater, it's pretty important to know is, do we really think it's 60 or do we really think it's 100? Because if it's 100 or some other bigger number, that charge ends up being half the amount, but probably what it's being set at. And we'll be driving more dollars than what was assumed that was needed. And then on the opposite side, if we're really thinking that parks is a 30% increase, that charge will never get realized because we probably won't ever get 30% more projects, to fund it at that rate. So it just seems strange. And then once it got published, I went online and looked at it a little bit. And then I found a couple other, seemed weird things. So the charge is going from $4,000 to $8,000. And if you look at the details, $900 of that $8,000 is the cost of recalculating this charge. It's the $50,000, $60,000 of consultant dollars plus probably staff time, dividing by these 60 projects that'll happen over the next 20 years. So that's $900 just, part of the charge just because we have to calculate the charge. And it just seems weird. And, like in 10 years down the line, if we want to recalculate them again, now it'll be twice that amount because it'll be the same consulting dollars divided by an even smaller volume. And then the parks goes from, we're not charging for parks to we're charging $1,000 per park. But the thing that's driving that parks fee is a $1 million project for the NECAS and the school site. And I didn't know that we, the city, were funding that. I thought it was all being funded out of the TLT, the tourist tax. And that just seems odd. I don't understand that one of, do we really have $1 million project that we're expecting the residents and the taxpayers and the new developers to fund? Or is that just something that was in a master plan once and it's getting carried forward even though we have a different way to do it? And then the other big increase is like a $3,000 increase in waste and sewer, which is, getting these 60 projects to pay basically a share of the $5 million project for the wastewater treatment plant back in, I don't know what it was, 08 or something like that, is what it seems like. So there's 3 or 4 things that just seem odd. It's it's the assumptions that are being used for the denominator. It's this parks, it's the calculation of the fee, and then it's, how are we charging new developments for money that we spent, big chunk of money that we spent long ago.
There were a lot of points in there. Randy, probably what I'd ask you to do is just shoot me an email summarizing that, and I'll ask the consultant to be more clear on those points during the public meeting that's coming up December 7th. But I do want to point out a couple of things. As far as parks, and the reason the city never included parks in their SDC charges in past is we never had a parks master plan that had projects quantified by dollars. We had a parks master plan, but there were no dollars associated with those projects. So in this effort, we had to go out and price all of those projects that are identified in the master plan to get dollars associated with that, so that the consultant could say, if you move forward on these projects, here's what percentage of that would play into the SDC reimbursement. And SDCs are only collected when there's new construction, brand new home is being built. So that's when SDCs come into play. It's not something that the city taxpayers are subjected to. It is when there's new construction within town is when those fees are collected. The same with the transportation. The reason there were no roads dollars included in our SDCs is the state regulation on how SDCs can be collected is very specific, and it's very complex. I'm not going to pretend that I understand it end to end. This is why we brought a consultant on that specializes in this to evaluate it, because it is a very tedious process. But we never had a transportation plan here in Cannon Beach, so we were not eligible to collect anything associated with new road developments because we did not have a transportation plan. There were no projects identified with specific dollars for growth. And that is really what SDCs is about when it comes to roads and or parks or our utilities for that matter. It's when there is growth. And because we don't pave a lot of our streets, we don't put in subdivisions and have to add brand new streets. It basically forbid us from being able to include roads in that. So pending the outcome of the transportation study and what the city decides and the community decides they want to move forward on down the road, we could probably have this consultant add that to our SDCs fairly easily now that this evaluation's been done. And again, I'll remind you, our fees haven't been evaluated since the 1990s. So we have not stayed on par with what it's costing the city to put our utilities in, much less roads or any park development that we do. Any of our pop-up parks or new added areas as far as parks, we were not able to collect any cost associated with that. The city absorbed all of it. And so that really needed to be up to date so that we were not losing potential reimbursement dollars or revenue, if you will, associated with that. As far as the school, that is TLT funds, as Bruce has spoken out about before. And a consultant inquired about that project. We clearly stated what that project was all about. And so I think that that's going to be a refinement that you see going forward, that is not part of the SDCs.
If I can just try to address the funding for the school project. It's sort of a dual purpose. A long time ago, there was discussion about the ability of smaller hotels to be able to have a draw for conferences, that sort of things, but they didn't have the big meeting room, any one of them individually. And so when we started, we talked about the 4 classrooms, which are a beautiful size, or 1,000 square feet approximately each. and to make those available as meeting rooms so that the smaller hotels could work together to try to get conferences or things to come in. So with that opportunity, we saw that we could use TLT dollars, which are very specific on how they can be used. They can be used for tourism-related facilities and tourism promotion. They cannot be used to do infrastructure. And so when people are saying, why are we doing the school and not putting the money towards infrastructure upgrades, we can't. And so we're using those funds. In the next 6 to 8 weeks, we'll be having discussions about doing a bond for that project. And the project, we're estimating right now, for sake of discussion, because we have no designs, is about $5 to $5.5 million. And the debt service on that is about $250,000. And our collections from the TLT, which is provided to us by the county, is close to $400,000. So the intent is to use the TLT funds. We could never save them until we could go ahead and do the project. So we need the funds now, but probably about 60% of what we collect from the county TLT is what we need to pay the debt service on that project. So that's how that's working. And that includes.
I understand how STCs work, and I think I understood how the funding for the school. But that was the surprise part to me, that there was actually a taxpayer development fee, a cost of $1 million. Because I thought all along that, hey, this is a chance where the tourists can help pay for a little bit of Cannon Beach, as opposed to the taxpayers funding all the things for the tourists.
Well, the tourism.
So now when some $1 million figure showed up that was going to be paid 30% by new development, and I'm assuming the other 70% would go back to residents, that was a surprise.
Okay, the funds that we're talking about using to pay the debt service, that is tourist money that was generated within the city and then is collected by the county, but then provided back to the city.
Yep, I
So
understand.
that is tourism. That project will be paid for by tourism.
Currently, the SDC is showing $1 million to be paid by developers and residents.
Okay, I have to go back and look at exactly how that's working, but the budget that we've put together does take care of developing the area that we call Necus and down along the banks. So the funds that would be collected, that $1 million or whatever it is, that's going to be over a significant period of time. So we have funds to do an awful lot of work there now. I don't know if there'll be additional work that might be contemplated later with the SDCs.
And then I have one other point along the SDCs, and that at the end of the report, it basically says, we will be at $8,000, and that's benchmarked against Lincoln City and Newport, and I don't remember, Warrenton, and there were like 4 cities. And 3 of the 4 are in much larger cities than what we are. And that there is a 2020 Oregon survey, or a survey of Oregon cities, specifically on SDCs. And it sure seems like there's towns like Sisters and Lapine and Yachats and Walport that are much more, a better benchmark to compare to than those much larger cities.
That may be true, but SDCs are not consistent, across the board. For example, ours were not updated since the 90s, and we could go, back and forth on this all day. But I would not hesitate to make an argument that a portion of a park, a prorated portion of a house, is that different in a big city versus a small city. everybody has a contribution of a certain amount. So, and SDCs are different, are an animal that are just hard to understand, but.
But this survey of Oregon cities, one of its graphs is SDC, the size of SDCs are clearly correlated to the size of the city. Cities that are Salem, Portland, Eugene, they're in the tens of thousands. And Lincoln City and whatever, they're in the eights of thousands. And smaller cities are in smaller of thousands. And it seems like we should be benchmarking ourselves to the correct level of city.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that.
In fact, it seems like we should be including ourselves in the benchmarking, which didn't seem like we participated.
No, and we can start to participate, especially after we go ahead and we change them. But I think it goes back possibly to what some of what Rick was saying, that we haven't used those. We haven't made that part of, taking care of our facilities. And now that we are, we need to come up with a number that, in my mind, is fair to the people that are here, more than what somebody else thought to charge someplace else. When we're talking about benchmarking, it's interesting to go ahead and take a look at it. But I think that when we are looking at what we need, we should base it on our needs and our considerations. So, for what that's worth, which is not much.
Randy, if you'll shoot me an email with the summary of your items, I'll ask the consultant to be more focused on addressing those points. So maybe we can get some clarity on some of those items.
All right. Does that answer some of your questions, Randy? And can you get in touch with Karen and Bruce to add more comments?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm sort of surprised it didn't get highlighted through the whole presentation to council that this 5 million wastewater treatment plant is driving $3,000 of the increase. And this $1 million project for the parks is driving another large chunk. And, so.
Okay. Well,
those are all good questions and good points, Randy.
We'll be having more discussions anyway about those. So we will definitely take that up. I'm a little curious about some of those myself. So thank you for that.
You got a couple hands up, Nancy.
Let's see, we have any other questions? We have one more topic that Jenny brought up, but
Does Jen want to talk?
Well, Rick has his hand up and so does Betsy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Betsy.
So who has their hands up? Okay.
Rick and Betsy.
Rick and Betsy.
Okay. Betsy, is there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, and it's going to be really quick. I briefly talked to Jason about this, and I'm sorry your wife's been ill, Jason, but being able to attend this meeting is just wonderful because I can hear everyone really clearly. And when I try to go to the city meetings where people are sitting around at their chairs up on the dais, the microphones are pretty sensitive. They pick up a tremendous amount of noise of people shuffling and ruffling papers around. And I know people need to look at what they're doing, but it's almost too much to try to attend the meetings virtually. I mean, COVID's a drag, right? But I love being able to stay home and participate. But I wonder if whoever's in charge of how that all gets transmitted from the city hall through my computer could ask people or do something about that background noise, because it's quite distracting and almost too difficult to hear people sometimes. Thank you.
That's a good point. It's a real good point. I don't think we think about that when we start shuffling around on the table.
Yeah. And Rusty does talk to us all the time, but these microphones are pretty, you don't see them when we're up here. And so we bang into them and put stuff on top of them and all that. So Rusty's always telling us, don't do that.
And we forget. Rick, you had your hand up? And you're muted. You're still on mute. There you go.
I'm back. Good.
Yeah, you're back.
I really want to thank Betsy for saying something to the chief. I was kind of dealing with muting the first time that came up, but yeah, about your wife, chief, I hope everything is going well with her, and I hope you'll be able to keep her happy until she's back on her feet. I did want to ask the chief a question, if I could. We talked about this before. The current, as I understand it, the current parking ticket is $25. Yeah, and I brought that up at a previous meeting, but I really think it would be before anything else can be done about parking regulation, parking enforcement, traffic control, or anything else. We need a parking fine that is large enough to deter people from parking where they shouldn't park. And that would be a lot more than $25. I believe I have heard that it hasn't been raised since the 1980s. Think about where you were and what you were doing in the 1980s. Think about what things cost in the 1980s. I think this is something that the city council doesn't have to wait on. We should be acting on this now, because it will lay the foundation for whatever else we attempt to do to control over, illegal parking, parking in bike lanes, whatever.
I think that's something we probably should think seriously about. Yeah.
I hear from a lot of people, Rick, that it's a small price to pay $25 to spend the day at the beach.
You said that before, Chief, and I thought that put it perfectly. That was exactly the point. It's just the cost of going to the beach. No big deal. Yep, it's got to be more than that if it's going to matter at all. It's kind of a joke, and it must feel terrible trying to enforce something when you don't have a weapon, basically. Yeah. So we could do that
The other
now.
one is it probably costs more to collect it. And if it goes to court, it's costing you way more for that judge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Is that something we can consider, Bruce?
Absolutely.
Okay. So put that down on your notes. We probably should be thinking seriously about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Jenny, you're up.
Well, and I guess mine isn't really a concern that we can all talk about and solve, just the division in our town over some of the issues recently that have recently come up, as well as the end of tourist season when everybody's at the end of their rope. I just think it's something to keep in mind that we all do need to come together, and holidays are oftentimes families come together, even though they don't like each other. So that's really why I brought it up. Just, I think it's on everyone's mind that how we're going to get past this either way.
Well, I know that there's, the city council is having a retreat on December 8th and 9th, and it's it's open to the public. I mean, you can zoom in if you want to. And one of the discussion topics that I've requested is how we can improve communications between the city and the general public. Because I think there was an awful lot of slinging going on during this last election. And I think we really need to kind of sit back and say, okay, now that that is over, hopefully it will be over eventually. We need to come together again as a village. We've always been a pretty close village, and this really did divide us. So we do need to find out how we can better communicate with everybody, with each other. There were a lot of accusations thrown around that had absolutely no substance whatsoever. And we need to determine how we can do that. We don't have the best public communications in terms of a newspaper or any kind of outlet to be able to do any communicating with the public in general. So we really need to figure out how we can do that.
I agree. And I feel like some of the events that we might have all as locals gotten together before, say Friday nights at stormy, weather, some of the early days of festivals, or even lighting the light at Haystack holidays, we're not really all getting together to do that. And so we're not having our community come together. I feel like the ham dinner at the fire station, that was always one that you saw everybody you knew. And without doing that stuff, we're kind of holed up in our own little lives. And it'll be nice when we can all come together again.
I miss the community potlucks. I think those, I know when John Williams was mayor, he had a community potluck once a month. And that really helped. Of course, with COVID, we can't do that now, but I would sure like to see us be able to reinstitute something like that, that would bring the community together, maybe tackle some of these issues in a community potluck. We used to be known for our potlucks, and we haven't had one for years, literally. So we really need to do something like that. I don't know that specifically, but something like that, that brings the community together. That's not necessarily a tourist-oriented event.
Right. And since Cannon Beach residents ourselves, we're so high percentage of vaccinations, but the state still has the mandates in place.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, we had a very successful program for giving shots at the gardens Wednesday. And did you say, Nancy, maybe 200?
I heard that there were about 200 people that got vaccinated. I know I tried to stand in line to get in there, and the line was just too long. So, and didn't you say you waited an hour?
For an hour and didn't get very far. So I think there's going to be another one coming up fairly soon.
Yeah, I don't know when the next one is, but I'm sure there will be. There were a lot of kids in those lines, so the kids are getting inoculated. That's good. That's good. So anything else you want to talk about before?
Is the History Center still on?
No.
Who's here?
Les has his hand up.
Les?
It's Lynn. I just want to do a public service announcement. We're having a blood drive tomorrow, but it's booked full. But we have a 2-day blood drive in December, the 6th and 7th. And they're low on blood, so they're doing double days. Please think about signing up for that and pass the word around.
Okay, good. Nancy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a public service announcement also.
Okay.
Keep in mind that on Wednesday, the county will be giving vaccines in Astoria at the fairgrounds. 3:30, I think it's from like 4 to 7 p.m. And there's no cost for those. And you do have to make an appointment through the county, but it's very doable.
Is that boosters also?
Yes.
Good.
You can also go to the drugstores in Seaside and get your boosters and your immunizations. It's a piece of cake.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Right.
And Nancy, did you have something, another one? You said you had 2.
No, that was it.
That's it. Okay, great. Okay, any other, Jeannie?
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I just got off work. Sorry I was late for this. I think this is a really great thing, your Coffee with the Councilors. On communication, everybody goes to the post office, and I know there's some little flyer up there about I think agenda, for the month, maybe. Is that the way they do it? But I was wondering if there could be something kind of, I don't know, a little bit colorful so it might attract people to look at it. Anything that, like a 2 or 3 bullet things, just simple, but and maybe Spanish and English, too, and invitation to like Coffee with the Councilors. I wish we could get some of the Mexican-born people here, occasionally. I did ask them personally. I asked 2 different people, but they were working. They couldn't come.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just a little idea.
No, that's a good idea. We have that section in the post office. Maybe we could, dress it up a little bit and make it a little more attractive for people to even take a look at. People
Well,
may not even know we have it there.
I know it. I'll try to tell people orally. And I think that's a good idea about the potlucks again, by the way. We really used to have lots of fun with that. And maybe even solve the problem, you know.
Well, it would at
So,
least help. It would at least help, I think,
yes,
if we could do
right.
it. But we can't until COVID is, we've turned COVID around, then maybe we
Yes.
can think about that. But it is definitely something to think about, I think.
And
Anything else?
I agree about that parking ticket thing. I think it ought to be raised, and yeah, I got one time. The only time I've ever even driven my car into town. Usually I just walk. But I thought, oh well, I'm donating it to some future building or something worthwhile.
Jason, do you have any idea how many parking tickets are issued every month?
I don't offhand. We certainly you see them in the monthly stats, I think.
Yeah.
But I can certainly follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to know that. All right, anything else?
Oh, one last thing. Do you know, do any of the businesses need employees still, or are they pretty well okay for the winter because it's not, so we don't have as many visitors? I haven't seen as many signs, but what do y'all know? How are we doing for employees?
I don't know. Does anybody know? I would imagine, I always hear that there's help needed. So whether it's winter or summer, but
yeah,
maybe not quite as bad right now because of the winter, but.
Yeah. As far as traffic citations and warnings, there were 199 warnings.
Wow.
This year, as opposed to last year, there were 107. And traffic citations, there were 33. And last year it was 21.
That per month?
For the month of September.
Month of September.
I see.
Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
Those don't say whether they're parking though, right? Just traffic citations could be speeding or anything else, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I'm curious about parking.
Driving was suspended license 6, vehicle using mobile device 6, failure to yield 1, failure to obey 1, driving without required lighting 1, reckless driving 1, and violation of basic rule 6.
I didn't hear anywhere on there jaywalking. I gotta say, I'd love to hear a few jaywalk.
There you go. All right, and with that, Dale, did you have something to say?
Well, I'm just going to throw out the fact that I have no clue what a parking ticket costs in Cannon Beach, and maybe it's going to be common knowledge for visitors, but I would bet that most visitors would have no clue whatsoever. So maybe people that are really smart says, hey, it's only $25, I'll park and there's no parking spot because nobody will tow me, and I'll pay it as just as if it's a fee to park. But I think from my perspective, unless you post something that says, hey, it's going to cost you a whole bunch to park illegally, I don't see where raising the parking ticket costs is really going to have any impact. It would only have an impact on those people who realized that it's now wildly expensive and they don't want to pay the price. That's just my comment about parking fees.
I think you'd find, Dale, that the word would get out, especially
Maybe so.
people who
I don't know.
Well, we do live in an internet age, and a lot of the people who come here frequently. They you've bitten once and you probably go, oh, gee, that's got to think about that twice.
It's not a bad idea to publish
it's worth a shot. I mean, right now it's basically, as the chief says, it's basically not a penalty at all. It's just a park. It's like paying for a parking meter. It's not enough to really matter. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to adjourn this session unless anybody has some burning question or burning comment to make.
I just want to ask Rick to give me a call.
Okay,
Thank
will
you,
do.
guys. Thank you.
All right. We will see you next month. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy
And
Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much. for your
Thank you,
service.
counselors.
All right.
Thank you very much for all your good service. Democracy in action.
Thank you. See you next month.